Hey everybody, I hope you're doing great out there. I'm here today with Nick Levasseur of Abandoned Miniatures, which I'm pretty excited about because Nick's crafting is on a whole new level, man. I mean, it's high level stuff. And his cinematography is fantastic. So, hey Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Tinu?
I'm doing pretty good today. It's a good day.
It is.
So Nick, I've been blown away by watching your videos and seeing the cinematography that you're doing that's just like on top of the bills, which is just absolutely incredible. And if anyone hasn't checked out Abandoned Miniatures yet, just turn it on while you're listening to this and just look at what Nick's doing and you'll see why I'm so blown away by him. How did you start crafting and deciding to do a YouTube channel?
That's a great question. I mean, I've always kind of been interested in art stuff, but really focused on learning video and filmmaking for a long time. And I don't know, a couple of years ago, I think maybe I was on YouTube and I saw somebody sculpting something with super sculpty clay. And I was like, oh, that would be a lot of fun if I could learn how to do that and make my own little monsters or something. And so I tried that a little bit and then I got busy and it went away. But then once the pandemic started, I had a little more time on my hands. I was kind of working from home, and I've had this idea in my mind for a while as a filmmaker that it would be really cool if I could make my own little scenes and then light them and film them like their own little film set. Because that way I could do it in my living room, and I wouldn't need all this money and crew and all this stuff. And so I made one from one of the places that I had been to years ago. And just picked up a couple little techniques from YouTube, I guess, and tried to film it. And it was pretty bad, but it was good enough to be like, all right, this could be a lot of fun. And just that flexible schedule that I had with work let me learn a lot in a few months, and decided this would be something that I could do, long term, because I enjoy it that much. And so I started trying to plan for a YouTube channel. So yeah.
So wait a second. You just had tried a little bit of sculpting and then you didn't start doing any of these dioramas until the pandemic?
Yeah, I really didn't until probably March or April of that 2020 year. I might have done like one thing years ago with a couple of miniature figures from a board game I had, but that was just like one little scene in a photo. So yeah, just learn from YouTube, and I'm pretty picky. So when I do something and I don't like exactly how it looks, I'll do it again. I'll try to find techniques, even if I have to figure it out myself, to make it look a certain way. And so I kind of did that. And I think obviously my photography and video experience makes my modeling look better than it is, I think, because there's so many awesome creators out there, but they don't know how to film them.
I'm one of those.
Yeah. No, you do.
I'm trying to learn from your channel.
You do great. I mean, your most recent video, it looked like you put a ton of time into it. Even some of the camera movement and stuff was great. So you're learning. For sure.
Oh man, I think we both have. We're trying to apply our obsessive compulsive disorder to something that's positive.
For sure, yeah. It's a lot of fun though. I mean, it takes a lot of time, and my wife can tell you that it takes a lot of room in our house, and I've probably spent a good amount of money in the last 2 years on equipment and supplies and all that. But it's a lot of fun, and surprisingly, like I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I thought it would be amazing if by the end of this year I had a couple thousand subscribers on YouTube or something. And so when it started to grow semi well in the first few months, I kind of dug into it. And right now I'm just trying to balance that right now. I mean, I have a full-time job. I'm still sort of working from home, but I've been a lot more busy. And as you know, as you try to build a channel, there's always more things that you can do. And so I'm just trying to find that balance of, all right, what can I improve without adding even more time and effort to my schedule,
So basically you're working a full-time job and doing this channel at the level that you're doing. And that's like really impressive, man.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's a constant frustration for me because I'm trying to post a video every 2 weeks. And so just the idea of doing the pre-planning for a project, building it, filming it, and editing the thing within 2 weeks, it's not hard for some people when they do these small, more simple projects. But as I go, I keep getting bigger and bigger ideas. And so it's been really hard to try to make all of that work within a 2 week span. And not only that, but I've been really thinking this week about how I can improve just like maybe some of the camera angles and some of what I put into the video. And I have so many ideas, but it's just going to require so much more editing time and stuff. And so just trying to figure out the most efficient way to do that is frustrating, but it's also been really good creatively to like make sure you have to be doing a new project every couple of weeks. I might not be able to spend as long on a project as I'd like, but I'm pushing myself to keep going, you know?
Yeah, it sort of forces the floodgates of like, you know, is the old, you have to use it or lose it, you know, so the floodgates of creativity start to open up the more and more you do it. And I think that's important for people out there who are first starting out also to realize that, like, yeah, you have to just kind of keep priming the engine. And the more you do it, the more relaxed you get about your creative ideas. You're not so precious about them. And you just kind of just start letting them go. I mean, man, I put all kinds of things on my channel that sometimes I look back at them and I'm like, oh, Lord. But yeah, so after watching your, like, insane, to me, insane growth, how, and just that's a beautiful thing, and you 100% deserve it. Your stuff is just, it's so good. But I've just watched you like take off. So I have a feeling, my friend, that it won't be too long until, you know, you'll be able to do this like completely full time. At least that's what I really hope for you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, I've kind of, since I left school, whatever it was, 12, 13 years ago, I have been always trying to make something work that was a job that I enjoyed. And so I tried to do a small film company with a couple friends, and that was a lot of fun for a couple of years. But we weren't business people. We were definitely more of the creative mind. And so we had a little harder time growing it, I guess, to be sustainable. And so that ended up changing, and I've always just been looking for something like, all right, what can I do to allow me to have more free time so I can be more creative and not just work a job. And I did not ever think that YouTube was going to be a thing. Actually, me and my friends 10, 12 years ago would kind of make fun of YouTube. Like, we thought, because we were like, you know, we made short films and stuff, like it was more creative than YouTube, and we didn't want to be a part of it. And now YouTube is so much bigger than I ever thought, and amazing creative people. So it's funny that that's where I'm at now. But yeah, I really hope I can do it full time at some point, just to be able to do the art more and focus on that instead of having to do, you know, all of this juggling.
Well, man, if you're able to like really go full time, I'm almost frightened to see the things you're gonna do, man. It's you're already like, I thought you were doing it full time, and yeah, I've also like kind of put myself on this like trying to do a video every 2 weeks, because when I first started, I was doing a video a week, and I was just like, well, this isn't fun, you know. It's too much. And to me, and I think you may be similar, I love the details of stuff, and I think you're a detail-oriented guy. And so to me, like the fine little pieces of parsley on the plate at the end of the project that just try to bring it up like several notches, at least in my mind, is my favorite part. And if you're taking all of that away because you're trying to force feed these videos down this pipe, you're not really reaching your potential, or I feel I'm not reaching my potential. So yeah, I feel that. I mean, that's where I see myself right now, to be honest. Like, I bring a project as far as I can get it. I think I have a good way of knowing how to make something look
good enough that when I film it, when I put it on camera and I hide some of the details in the shadows with my lighting, that it'll look good. But in reality, I know there's so many more details that I wish I could add to it, and I just don't have the time. So it's not only trying to be creative with it, but it's like, I don't know, putting your foot down and saying, how far can I bring this thing before I just need to stop and move on?
I'm sure it's hard to find the energy to do it also, where, you know, like right now you're kind of, you're balancing two worlds, as you said. And, you know, yeah, that's really tough to like go and like put creative energy. I'm sure you have a relatively creative job in whatever area of life, whatever else you're doing. But that's always tough, man. It's always been hard for me to do two things at once.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, my schedule right now allows me to do a little of everything throughout the day, and it helps. But at the same time, it doesn't, like, I can paint a bunch of stuff and let it dry while I go and work on my other work. But when I'm like fragmented throughout the day, it really is hard to just focus in. So that's something I've been thinking about.
One thing that I liked that I saw in I don't know if it was your latest video or the one before it, was you're using this, I think you said it's a Rhino Slider, and it's I guess it's, well, why don't you tell us what a Rhino Slider is? My point is that I'm not sure I've seen anyone do it on YouTube where you're basically doing, you know, like a fast montage, which is just a time-lapse shot with a moving camera, which we see that in movies and stuff, but I'm not sure I've seen someone on YouTube do it before. So can you tell the audience kind of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely more and more it's cropping up on YouTube in different areas, but so the Rhino Slider system that I have right now, it is a motorized slider, so it can move the camera left and right on the slider, or forward and backward, however you position it. But it's also a full pan and tilt head, so it can tilt the camera up while sliding or make some kind of a move. And it also has a focus motor, so I can, let's say I want to push in like a dolly move into my diorama. I can have the focus actually change throughout the move, so everything stays in focus, which is a problem at the miniature level. Not very much is in focus when you're filming small things. And so it really helps. But yeah, then you can do things like time-lapse with it. And that's something I've been thinking about doing more. I know you were talking, I think, about one of the time-lapse shots that I did of building. That's something, it's hard for me to think about filming and building the thing.
It's the hardest part about the whole YouTube experience for me, but continue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought this morning, I actually wrote it down. I was like, I need to start planning specific parts of a build. If I am thinking about my next project, plan a few parts that I want to film in a special way, because otherwise I just get building and I just make sure it's on camera somehow and it's not creative. But yeah, I set the slider up a couple times like that to do a move, and so it's not as just basic and boring as you're watching it, that there's some camera movement and it feels like you're progressing through something, you know. The slider system isn't cheap, but it was basically exactly what I needed to film with the crazy macro probe lens thing that I film with. It's really finicky, and you need something really stable and controlled. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, because even shooting in slow motion it will take a lot of the wobble out, but still, you're so tied in with that the camera. Once you put that, he has this long, what do you call it? It's a probe lens, right?
Yeah, it's a macro probe lens.
24 millimeter, right?
Yeah, that's the cool part about it. It's really long, and so I can stick the thing inside of my diorama, because I do mostly interiors, and so to be able to stick it in there, but then it's still a 24 millimeter, like fairly wide angle, it feels like you're actually a little person in the scene, and it has a little bit more of a focus range. You know, normally macro lenses, you get a tiny bit of something in focus and everything else is blurred. This helps to get more of the scene, and the slider just is really cool. I can program that move, and so it can push in and feel like the camera's really moving through a scene.
Yeah, just so the audience has an idea of like what we're talking about. So imagine an SLR camera, which is just like a camera you would hold in both of your hands with a lens on the front. Well, Nick has an attachment. His other lens, this probe lens, it's imagine attaching something that's about the thickness of a broomstick, maybe a little bigger, and I don't know, maybe 2.5, 3 feet long to the front of the camera. So it would be quite unwieldy to try to hold this thing in your hand and move it around in something as small as what he's doing. So he has it on this motorized slider, which is programmable. I'm not really sure how you do that, if you use your phone to do it or not.
Yeah, you can use your phone or right on the slider to do it. There's a couple options. And I tell you what, filming with this lens is a pain because of how long it is. Like, if you just want to tilt the camera up a little bit, just tilting it up at the angle of this long lens, it actually moves it in height inside the scene by a couple inches.
It's leverage.
It basically, because of the leverage. So instead of, what I was doing at first was, trying to adjust the height of my tripod, and it's so minute changes. It was so hard. I ended up just getting one of these motorized standing desks, and I put the slider rig on the desk, and I can just use the button to motorize the desk up and down like in tiny increments, and it makes it so much better. Yeah, it's awesome.
That's brilliant. Yeah. That's amazing. I never thought about that. That like basically that camera, like what you're moving like a 1/2 inch on the actual camera body is moving like 3 inches by the time it gets to the end of the lens.
Yeah. Yep. And not only that, but the lens itself, its maximum aperture is f/14, and so you need a ton of light to film anything with it. And so when you're filming interior dioramas where I'm only letting light come in through this little miniature window, I've been toying with all kinds of lights and lighting accessories to get enough light into it. And I'm also filming in slow-mo, so that means you even need more light.
You're kind of back to you've kind of gone back in time to like when they first started making movies, where they had to blast everything with so much light and the actors would be dying and sweating.
Right. For sure.
So you shoot at 120 frames per second, or as people who would work in doing film would say FPS. So 120 FPS. Can you explain to people what 120 FPS is and what that means and what it does for your final effect? Yeah.
So I mostly film at that frame rate because
you're talking about like when you shoot the models itself, you just shoot like a regular 24 frame rate for your tutorial. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. And sometimes I will for the end model, depending on what it is. But a lot of these models I'm using either some kind of like a haze or a fog effect or dust. And so in real life, when you see the sunlight peering through a window and you see the dust in the air, it moves fairly slowly. And so it's the same in miniature, but the whole scene is so small that the dust or fog appears to be moving really fast when you're just looking at it in there. So to get the same kind of effect and make it look more real, you have to film at a higher frame rate so that you can slow it down. So we normally film at 24 frames a second in normal speed video, and so 120 frames is like 5 times slower when you bring it back down. And so sometimes I'll use 60 frames a second. It depends on what I'm doing.
And that would make it a little faster, right?
Right. And so it really depends on the effect that I'm doing in the air. Like if I'm not doing any kind of dust or fog effect, there's probably not any need to do a slow-mo. But yeah, when I first tried, there was a little thing. I haven't done it in a little while now, but I wanted to get more like that granularity of like dust in the air, but because the fog or the haze in the can kind of thing that I have is cool to allow you to see the light coming through and make it look like light rays, but it didn't have like dust particles. And a lot of these abandoned buildings have so much dust in them, that's what you see. And so I had this idea of taking like a little bottle of baby powder and just puffing that in there, and that actually worked really well. But it was very obvious that it was just like swirling around in the air so fast, and so I got a brighter light and went to 120 frames a second, and it made it look so much more realistic. And on the same note, the only way that I'm able to film even with my brighter lights with this lens right now is that I use a specific camera from Sony that's really good in low light. And so I'm actually filming at 12,000 or 25,000 ISO, which is unusable on most cameras, but on this camera it's completely clean for the most part. You don't get the noise and stuff that you would.
The Sony A7 III, or is it A7 Mark III?
The A7S III, yeah.
S3. See, I was wrong on both accounts, and I thought I had did my research, but I was wrong.
There are so many different Sony cameras that it's tough to remember.
That camera's amazing. One thing that I really like about that camera, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes my research obviously fails, is it can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. Correct?
Yeah. This camera is pretty much the camera for what I'm doing. It can do a full 4K, 120 frames, and it's a good quality codec. It's like a 10-bit codec, so it's really good for color correction and stuff in post. But it also has a full frame sensor, which I love, and it can do the amazing low light. The only downside is it doesn't take super high resolution pictures, and so I do have a different camera that I usually use if I'm going to take some real photos.
Yeah, I know. That's a strange trade-off that they did there. 12 megapixels, which is not that much for a camera these days.
Yeah. And so the idea is the less megapixels, the bigger each pixel actually is, and so it can capture more light, and I think that's the big reason why it's so good in low light. There are other cameras that have really high resolution sensors, just don't seem to have that same low light capability. So the trade-off is there, but it's an amazing camera.
It's a great trade-off, because for me, like, the thing that I'm interested in is video and being able to shoot in low light. I love the way that looks, and the camera that I'm using right now, it's garbage for that kind of thing. I mean, it looks fantastic, in my opinion, for, if you have a lot of daylight, and I blast like a softbox into, my work area when I'm working, and it tends to look good. There's not too much noise, although it's still a bit, it's not a beautiful noise like film grain. It's a really ugly noise. Yeah. So I tend to not like it. And just really quickly, so when you're shooting like at this high frame rate, so that you can, so he shoots at a high frame rate so that when he plays it back at 24 frames a second, it is in slow motion and it's nice and smooth, because he has more frames to fit that amount of time. And basically it comes down to a sense of scale, where the dust particles he's talking about, or the smoke he's talking about, the scale looks bigger as it slows down. And this is the reason why, like, if during a old Godzilla movie from the 60s, it looks like this giant, well, it doesn't really look that realistic, but it's this giant monster, smashing buildings, where if you were watching it on set, it looks like a guy who's lost his mind in a toy store. It looks ridiculous. But when you slow it down, it has this impressiveness to it. So
yeah, you have to stop me when I'm talking about tech things sometimes, because I can get way more technical than most people.
Oh, no. I think it's awesome. And for me, I just want to try to balance it out, because I think a lot of the audience who listens has a really solid technical grasp. But every once in a while, I'll get some questions from people, and I'm like, oh, okay, wait a second. I got to try to make sure that I kind of like bring things back in, or like get a more general explanation in there, and then let you go off on whatever you want. So please don't curb anything you're saying. I'm digging it, man.
Yeah,
this is very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting to try to think about miniature scales on camera, because I did a little while back. One of the first videos that did a little bit better for me, actually, I tried to do like a whole little gag where I was using, what are they called? There's some kind of like water mister things and some lighting effects to make it look like there was a rain thunderstorm coming in. And
I saw that. It came out. It came out really well.
Yeah, the big effect kind of worked, I think. But the funny part, and some people did point it out in the comments later, but the water started pooling on the diorama so quickly that it started to drip, and you saw the fine mist in the background look like real rain, but then every time a water drop came down, it was like this giant water drop in scale. And so things like water and fire, in some ways smoke, just don't scale down to miniature in the same way. And so I know in the film industry, when they blow up a building or they have something on fire, they make the miniature of the building as big as possible. It's usually like maybe 1/6 scale or even bigger, just
That's
to get
right, the bigatures.
Yeah, the bigatures, which is super cool to me because it would give you so much room to film. And I had an idea.
Your wife is gonna kill you as soon as you want to do that, right?
I know. Well, I had an idea. Actually, my friend gave me this idea, and I loved it, but I didn't think I could pull it off in time. But the new Halloween Kills movie that just came out, all the trailers had Michael Myers walking out of the house that was on fire, just engulfed in flames. And so he's like, dude, you should just make that house and actually burn it and film it, and it would be awesome. Oh. And I was like, well, for one, I'd have to make it at a bigger scale, and then I don't have a yard big enough that I won't burn the neighborhood down. So
right. There's fire codes in your neighborhood.
Yeah. But the funny thing was, like a week ago, he doesn't make dioramas very often. There's a guy that does, he's like a professional clay sculptor guy. He's got 1.5 million subscribers, I think, on YouTube.
Do you know his name?
Stephen Richter.
Okay.
He found me a couple weeks ago, which is cool. And then he made that exact thing. Like he didn't.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was basically like in 1/6 scale. I think it was larger, and I know I commented on it, and he replied something about how he had a hard time even at 1/6 scale getting the fire to look realistic. But yeah, it was cool, and so I have ideas like that too. But I don't have a workshop. I have a little project room in the second floor of my apartment, and so I'm a little limited, you know.
Yeah. I saw it. It looked like you were in your basically in your kitchen in some of the shots I've seen, the behind the scenes that you're doing.
Yeah. That when I am finished with one and I film it, the only big space I have is either outside or my living room and kitchen, basically. So yeah, I have a lot of room to improve down the road.
Well, speaking of that improvement, like what are your like aspirations for like your channel and the art that you're doing?
I think one of the big reasons I wanted to start making some of these scenes, besides just the fun of it, I don't know, back in 2015, I think it was, me and my friends made this film after doing all of this urban exploring for, I don't know, I think I started back in 2008, so a long time. We went to a lot of these abandoned places, and I started a lot of my photography just taking photos of these cool decaying buildings. But where I grew up on Long Island in New York, there were a couple of these massive abandoned mental asylum kind of complexes, and one of them was so easy to kind of just go in and explore all these massive buildings. And so we made a small documentary short film on it, and it was one of the most fun projects we ever had. I mean, just spending like a month going in the place and bringing our professional camera gear in there, and then telling the story of kind of our country's journey in mental health practices and all of these things. I mean, this place had performed over 1,000 lobotomies, and they did the shock therapy. They did all these different things that were considered cutting edge at the time, and then obviously terrible as we learned more. And so
lobotomy is literally the cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly. So being in those places, though, I mean, just getting to stand in a room where you know something like that may have happened decades ago, but now it's been sitting for 20 or 30 years and decaying. I just think there's something about that beautiful image of how time starts to decay things, and you know, vines and trees would start to grow onto the buildings too, and nature takes back some of that. But
it's so aggressive. It's so aggressive. It only takes like, I don't know, a couple of months before, like, you know, basically the humidity and heat of not having air conditioning. And I know this well from dealing with hurricanes out in Louisiana. It's like a lot of the places get hit by a hurricane and it may not be that damaged, but then you don't have electricity for, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And with the humidity, it really can cause serious problems in the house. But so you start getting this, and then boards start warping, then windows start cracking, then animals get in, and then, you know, nature gets in. And it's amazing how, like I said, how aggressive it is. Is there a place where people can find this documentary?
yeah, so the website's called Project Senium. It's Senium. I mean, this was a while ago, and so we were confident in our abilities, but we were still young back then. So, but it was one of our most fun projects, and you can see some of what I talked about. I mean, New York is not as hot as Louisiana for sure. So some things lasted a while, but this place kind of became a playground. Like, people just go through there and destroy everything, and graffiti. And so
Of course.
that was one of my big things, though. I was like, these places are so beautiful in how they're standing now, kind of frozen in time. And with all of this dark history, I think it's really important for us to remember history like that as we go forward. And so that's why we made the film. But then now with these dioramas, like, I was kind of just thinking I could immortalize some of these places, or even just some of the ideas of these places, by making scenes and leaving out the graffiti and some of the damage that people do, and let them tell their story without that. And so part of what I'm doing right now, I think, is just trying to continue my channel. I'm doing things for movies. I'm doing things like all over the place, a little bit of everything. But a lot of what I want to do is kind of tell some stories of places that are forgotten or have so much history that could be, you know, realized in these little miniature dioramas, and how I film them too, the mood and the feelings that you get. I've had a lot of people, just really awesome people in the comments, just being encouraging on that fact, this kind of talking about how the footage that I get of these little places invokes these feelings that remind them of this and that. And I just think that's awesome that we could do that with just, you know, crafting and filmmaking techniques. So I don't know where I want to go. Certainly I want to get the YouTube channel and everything going to a point where it can sustain me, and I can be more free to explore bigger artistic options with it, you know. But a lot of the underlying, like, story is wanting to portray some of these places that are not going to be around anymore. I mean, these places were all built like 80 years ago, 100 years ago, and so they have like the lead paint which peels off of the walls in a specific way, and we're not going to have places that look like this anymore. You know, even the architecture was different, and so I just think that all of that's really interesting. So,
man, the way you use latex rubber to kind of replicate that peeling wallpaper and paint that you're talking about,
yeah,
that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is worth the price of admission alone, which is free because it's YouTube.
right.
But you can find Nick on Patreon at Abandoned Miniatures and help him out. But that technique alone, man, is genius. And don't be surprised if you see it crop up in my videos.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I use that technique so often that recently I've just been like, all right, I might kind of glaze over it in the next couple of videos, because if somebody watches each video that I do, they're going to be tired of me explaining the same thing over and over.
That's those hyperlinks, man. That's what that's beautiful for.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't remember where I first found that. It's really interesting. There's so many different niches in the crafting and miniature world. Like I'll go and find a channel that all he does is paint little models of tanks from World War II or something, and I learn really awesome weathering and rusting techniques from this guy that does these miniature tanks. And I'll watch somebody else that does something like a dollhouse and learn something totally different. And so some of that is just watching a lot of people and seeing what is out there. But sometimes I just have something that I really want to replicate in a certain way. And I spend a couple days just trying different techniques, maybe even like kind of making my own up on the way and see what works, But that's what I don't have that much time for. And so I have to limit that a little bit. But
Oh, I think, you were talking about like the stories of the buildings that you're going to. And I think if you could find a way to balance that throughout your tutorials, you'll be like on to gold, because it's something that I've been slowly trying to like work into my videos also, where the idea of like some sort of secondary story is happening, and the more it can relate to your project, the better, of course. And you sort of seem to have that sort of kind of built into what you're wanting to achieve finally with your aspirations for this, right?
yeah, that's a great point. It's something I've been thinking about. I have a small list of things that I've kind of written down that I want to start trying to improve on, and that's one of them. Trying to add a little more of the story behind why I do some of this, and maybe the story behind a specific piece. The other thing too, like I think, which is maybe one big difference between your channel and mine, is like personality. Like you inherently have so much personality baked into your videos. You have, Tinu, you have the father, you have all of this like story stuff going on, and I'm kind of just like, hey, we're gonna make something, and here's how I'm doing this, and here's how I'm doing that. And so I look at some of the really big channels on YouTube that do something similar to me, where they kind of set out on a project and they build it, and most of them have a setup that is definitely bigger than the tiny room I have, but that they can have the camera kind of pointing towards them and the project. And so you're like almost always seeing them, seeing how they look at things, and they're talking while they're doing it in some points. And so you feel like you're getting a lot more of a personal connection. And I think there's just a lack of that on my channel right now. And maybe that's why, something like Patreon hasn't been as big for me yet, because people might sign up because they really like my stuff, or they really want to learn because they're doing something exactly like I am. But I definitely haven't tried to infuse my personality or even just let them see into my workflow as much. And your channel, I mean, they might just like the characters enough, or how you portray them and the storytelling you do. Even with your editing, there's so much more storytelling that you do. I think that might be a big edge,
Well, I don't know, man. You've got quite a lot of people really digging your channel. So whatever you're doing 100% correct. And I know we all there's a lot of things on my channel too that I want to improve on and change. So I hear you on that front of trying to. You want to make it to where you feel like you're putting your best foot forward and giving people the most they can latch on to. And it's a little scary. It can be a little scary putting your personality out there. I mean, it's already such a vulnerable thing where you kind of just put your stuff out into the world. And for me, it can be very scary because a lot of my stuff is very silly. And, it's very easy for me to go a little too far and or just some stuff I look back at and I'm like, oh, why? But that's just part of what's kind of naturally coming out. So I'm a silly person. So that's just what seems to come to the forefront. And your stuff has a nice, solid, serious vibe to it. And I think that people a lot of times that's a good thing for people to latch on to, really, because sometimes they don't want to beat around the bush. You know, my channel is going off in different directions, and it is what it is, and hopefully that'll be a thing that people continue to like. But you know, you get to the point, you're showing what you're doing. It's the workmanship is incredible, and the camera work is incredible.
I appreciate that. I think it's so cool how YouTube, I mean, we're in similar niches of YouTube. We're both crafting, but even that, you know, even within that niche, there's so many different types of channels, and
For sure.
like you and like the Craftsman. I mean, I watched him, you know, here and there for a while now, and it's just because the way he presents, the way he seems very knowledgeable about the stuff, but his personality, it's funny, you know. It's not the type of channel that you expect this like brilliant, you know, finished diorama that's like, you know, of a certain thing every week. It's whatever he feels like talking about, but it's great because of the personality and the comedy. And so just the fact that we can have such different channels and different, you know, strengths in the same sort of part of YouTube, I think is really cool. And so, but the problem with that is it's also hard to like compare and see what maybe you know, we could do specifically to improve our channels, because everybody's got something that's working for them, and it's probably going to be different for us, you know.
But it's also good for people to like look at things and be like, oh, that's cool. I think, you know, like I'm gonna borrow a little bit of this and a little bit of that from. I mean, because that's, you know, like I definitely want people out there to know that, like, for 90% of the YouTubers out there, like doing crafting stuff, the reason we know crafting so well, and it's what Nick was explaining earlier, is because we watched YouTube videos. I mean, we had, you know, possibly some natural inclination to certain things in our life. Like, everyone has strong points, but you watch other people do things, and then you pull it into yourself, and you, or for lack of a better word, you put it back. Well, I was going to say regurgitate, so that's the word. The better word would be is putting it back out, which is a phrase, but
Yeah.
You put it back out there through your own lens.
I think it's been really fun, just to see people react to it, and the people that I've met through doing the channel, like other creators, like you, like it's been a really cool community, and overwhelmingly the comments are positive. It's hilarious when, you know, you get those few that aren't, and sometimes it's like, all right, you know, what could this person possibly be thinking? But on the note that I have a more serious tone, I just got a comment recently, and I thought it was quite funny. He said something like, you must not really sound like this in real life. He's like, stop trying to be cool, and you put some more, like, you know, energy into, like, sound like you're happy about your project. And I'm just like, man, this is how I sound in real life. This is my excited tone, you know.
I've had people comment on my channel how bad my fake Cajun accent is, and I am 100% from such a small Cajun town. I've changed my accent a little over time. It was much stronger when I was younger, and you'll hear it kind of fluctuate back and forth. Also, if I have a beer or two, my accent comes back stronger, like most people. There's just sometimes people are unhappy out there for whatever reason, and they just prefer to do that than just click to another video. But one thing that I really love doing is when people leave negative comments, I have a list of cool crafters that I think have better channels than me, and I just give them that list of people to go check out, you know, because obviously they want to see crafting videos and they don't like mine. So
that's awesome.
I tend to not hear back from them, which is nice.
I don't even look at the dislikes. Like, when I think the first time I got one was maybe when I did that collaboration with another creator, and a lot of her, she had a much bigger following, so a lot of her people came over, and the video started to pick up in the algorithm, and and I got one or two, and I was like, man, that's not good. But when I went over to her video, she had like 20 times the amount of dislikes, and I was like, all right, I guess it's just something that comes with, the big exposure. And so now I get plenty of dislikes on each video. I think I've had a couple people comment the same thing you said, like, why would someone dislike this video? People are just angry people sometimes, man. And I've gotten a couple of them that have left like 3 long paragraphs of like why this is bad and this is bad. And, I know we need to be nice to everybody, but there is a special type of person out there, this small percentage that just likes to hate comment on everybody's videos. And
yeah, it's like hate bots. Just move on. It's okay. Yep. If something really offends you or whatever, and you can address it, and you think that it'll be constructive in a certain way, then that's fine. I'm not saying people can't leave negative comments. Actually, I've gotten some decent insight from a few negative comments.
And like I said, overwhelmingly, it's been positive, and on Instagram too, I found so many people that have just been encouraging, and they're doing similar things, and it's great to connect with all these people. So I think it's great. I just think it's hilarious, especially since it's this free platform. They're not paying anything. They don't have to watch the video. And so to me, it's like, well, if I don't like somebody's video, then, unless it's offensive in a real way that needs to be called out, maybe, I'm just not going to say anything because, I don't want to spread negativity, so it is great that most people are spreading the positivity, and they are, making the community great. But
99% of the comments, because I've looked through the comments on your channel too, and they're just. I mean, it's almost like sometimes I feel like an imposter sometimes, because people just give these like really glowing reviews of just what I'm doing, and I'm trying, I'm genuinely trying to do the best job that I can, but when you see a certain amount of them, like sometimes it can leave you feeling a little like you've pulled the wool over someone's eyes, or you've infiltrated. Do you ever deal with anything like that?
I feel that in a couple ways with my channel, because I'm so new to crafting. There are so many people that are out there that have been doing it a lot longer than me. Even if they're not as like laser focused as I am, they still have a lot more experience and do some things so much better. And so just the fact that I know how to make something look great on camera, it feels like I'm an imposter sometimes, because I've had so many people ask like if I'm going to sell my dioramas and all of this, and I have sold one so far, and it was a good experience. But in general, I make them mostly just to film. Like I don't have a plan to put them on a shelf, and at this point, a lot of them are on shelves just because I have nowhere to put them, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. But
Nick, I got a shelf at my house.
You got a shelf. That's what people keep saying in the comments, man. I'm like, listen, I don't think it's a work of art worthy to be displayed on someone's shelf. Like I made it, it's unfinished. I made it to be filmed.
Is it even possible to ship them, or would that be a challenge?
It is. Some of them it might be harder than others. The one that I have sold was a very basic and small one, and I packed it real well. And actually, I mean, I'm in Virginia, and it went over to California, and it was fine. So that
nice.
It's possible. But I think I look at some of these other people that make dioramas and sell them. Some of these people that have larger followings, they make similar things to me. I mean, some of them are selling them up to like $1,000 for a piece. And I'm just like, even if I don't charge people, that much for a long time, if somebody spends a couple $100s on my piece, I want them to be absolutely happy with it. And if they see how great it looks on my video with this, whole big video lighting setup and fog and all this stuff, it is not going to look like that under the down lighting that they have in their living room on their shelf, right? So I've been struggling with that. I've been thinking, all right, maybe I need to plan specific projects in the future that will be made to be viewed more as a display piece, and I can do that and sell those. But to be honest, like some of these, one or two of them I basically filmed and then destroyed because they were so big and they were kind of unsightly unless you like looked inside them. Like no one would want them in their house.
Please film that in slow motion if you do it.
Yeah, for sure.
That I mean, I don't want to see you destroy any of these, but if you just got to, then capture it. Like you know, get yourself a Phantom camera.
For sure.
I hear what you're saying about like how you don't think that, you know, the crafting that you're doing is like it's not hitting like fully your standards of what you want to become. But that's one of the great things about YouTube is that it's people get to watch the evolution of a channel, the evolution of a creator. And that's one of these fantastic things about this platform. And I think it's one of the fascinating things about this platform, because you know, you've ever been walking through some place and you know there's a guy painting and you watch him paint and you know, and it's just unbelievably good, and you know that's a note that, you know, it's like any note. If you keep hitting the same note over and over again, it gets old pretty quick, no matter how good it sounds. So watching you evolve and try to change certain techniques in the way you're making videos, trying to change and up the already high camera techniques that you have, and also trying to get better at crafting and what you're doing and your storytelling, that's what this whole thing is about to me, I think.
That makes sense. And to be honest, you know, I haven't tried it, and so I don't know how it'll go. I just have so many people, you know, asking if I sell them, and a lot of the times people will comment, like, because I mentioned it in at least one or two of my videos that I'm a little worried about selling them, and people are like, listen, I'll buy it. Like, I'd love it to be in my house, and part of me is like, all right, maybe they're serious, maybe not though. Maybe they're just saying that, and as soon as they hear that it's going to cost more than $50, they're going to be like, oh, it's not worth that. You know, because even the materials for some of these things cost a good amount of money.
It can be expensive, yeah. I mean, I've watched my wife's art business and what she does, and sometimes, to be frankly honest, I'm surprised at what people will pay for some of her original stuff. And it also made me realize that not everyone makes the same level of income that I do. So, you know, there are people out there that dropping $1,000, $2,000 and much more is like, you know, $10 to you.
Right.
So, you know, and there's this also another funny thing in the art world is that if you underprice your stuff, it also makes people suddenly unsure as to whether they are making a good purchase, and perhaps that you feel that something's wrong with it. So price your stuff at what you really feel is fair to both parties, to you for putting in the time and the work and the effort, and also having a video of it, of the whole process, which is important, I think, to why people would be purchasing it also. So factor all that in, because I think any good business deal, both parties should leave not like feeling like they've gotten something over on someone, but they must feel like everybody walked away from the table happy. At least that's the way I hope the world would be approaching business. I think there's a lot of companies out there not doing that. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that was one of my worries up front was I want to price it, you know, price it well so people think they're getting something good, and that it's established that is what these types of things may cost. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably just a fear of, you know, it's not rejection, but kind of like, all right, you know, I sold this thing, and what if they don't absolutely love it? What do I do then? Well, you know, it will. I can provide good customer service. I can figure out if there's a problem and help them out, and probably most of the time that wouldn't happen anyway. So I need to get over that. But with YouTube too, though, I just feel like the imposter thing happens because YouTube isn't a place where you go only to hear from like absolute professional, like experts, right? You
Right.
generally go to YouTube just to just to learn and watch people that are doing things on a similar level that you might do them. Like it's generally people that may be proficient in something, may be pretty good, but aren't these absolute experts, and they're just showing their journey through what they're doing. And so I like that I don't have to be that expert, and that if I do a technique wrong or, whatever, that it is just me kind of learning along the way. And I think people understand that. But I think going beyond that, like part of why I was worried about even like a Patreon at first was, well, if I'm charging people, then I need to have this level of, expertise or whatever that I'm providing in certain ways. And so I think that's where it gets to me when I'm thinking about selling my pieces. It's like, oh, I'm no longer the guy that's messing around with some materials and taking photos of it. I'm kind of a person that's trying to say that I'm an artist in this area that's worthy of someone buying my piece, But.
Yeah, well, just so you know, you are an artist and you are worthy of it. It's you may not be an expert in every technique that you're trying to accomplish, and you're gonna make mistakes. I mean, everyone makes mistakes. That's part of the beauty of YouTube, is like people get to see a little bit behind the curtain, if you let them, of like what you're messing up. And it's built into the name of my channel, like where I make a lot of mistakes. So the whole craftastrophe part of it is kind of like an upfront warning, letting you know what you're getting into. But let me ask you this, and then we'll probably wrap it up. We've been going a little while, but so you must have, you've started the YouTube channel, but you must have, besides the documentary stuff, some other kind of professional film background using cameras?
Yeah, a little bit. So the website that is probably good, I mean, it hasn't been updated in a while now, but the small film company that I technically still co-own with my two friends is called Cellador Films, SELLADORE Films. Mm-hmm. If you just go there, .com.
I'll put it in the description. I'll put a link.
Yeah, you can see some of the work that we had done at that point. But yeah, so we did that, but a lot of the work that I did, to be honest, isn't on a website that I have, kind of, because we did so much like client work and stuff that would probably be wherever on their websites and things. But we did some travel work, some outdoor adventure type stuff, where like one of the companies that we worked with a little bit was Tensile. They make these tents that kind of are like you string them up in the trees. So between like 3 different trees, you can string up this tent and sleep off the ground. And so we did some really fun stuff with that. But then I did a lot of just kind of more corporate video stuff too that, isn't worth trying to find it. But
so before we go, lightning round. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so I saw this like wireless video monitoring system that you're using. Do you get a signal delay with that thing?
It's very slight. This is the older version. They have a newer one now, I think, too. It's a little more money, but it's really slight. I think most people have said that they're fine pulling focus with it, unless it's like a really, really, high pressure environment, like an actual film. But yeah, no, it's been awesome, and it was cheap. It was like a couple $100.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I might have to invest in something like that and change my setup at some point, because I can't really monitor myself at all. So I don't.
Which camera are you using right now?
I'm using an iPhone 11.
Okay.
That's what I film everything with. I can like kind of shift my head around sometimes, depending on where I'm trying to shoot from. But I really would like to be seeing myself. So next question: what medium are you airbrushing in?
Just basically acrylic paints.
So acrylic, okay.
Yeah.
Any ink?
A little bit of inks, yeah. I've noticed that the inks that I have, depending on what primers I'm using, they give me issues. Like they're not not compatible for some reason. But I like inks. I've used them more in the miniature, like trying to paint like a little monster or something. Like for pleasure. I've used them more for that, but I use inks a lot for washes and things as well.
And then, okay, so number 3, I seen you like using like a video monitor. Like, so if you have like a window, you might put like a video monitor in the back with like a forest scene, like outside of it, so that it serves as a light source also. And did you ever run into like, do you have to change stuff on the camera so you're not getting a roll, like video roll with that?
Yeah, it has to be at a certain frame rate, and so I think I've basically stopped using that technique since I've gone to using 120 frames per second mode, because it gives you issues. I was using it for a while when I was just at 24.
Are you using just like just a printout of something now?
At this point, I've not used anything for a little bit. I think these last couple projects, like the Tree of the Dead, I made this whole scene, so that didn't need it. But
right.
I think I've just haven't done it, and so I've thought about making a big printout. I might be doing like an actual green screen composite for one of my projects in the next month.
Mm-hmm.
That just requires a lot more editing work, so I've been...
That's going to be tough with that dust and smoke.
Yeah, you have to almost... With the motorized slider, you can program a move and you can make it do it over and over.
Oh,
and so,
you can layer compositing shots.
Yeah,
Nice.
I want to try to do that, but we're talking a lot more time in the edit,
Yes.
so I've been cautious, but yeah, I may do that.
What about doing a printout on a transparency and backlighting it?
Yeah, no, that sounds like a fun idea too. The big problem that I had with using a monitor was it was never big enough. Like I'd have to put it too close, and then my light wouldn't be able to shine past it the way I wanted. And so
Right.
I thought like a nice bright projector would be good, but it's really hard to get a projector that's bright enough without spending a ton of money when you're
Right.
using a lens at f14. So I'm still trying to figure out how I want to do some of that going forward, but filming at 24 frames, I did a couple projects like that, and even before I started the YouTube channel, I wish I could highlight it maybe in some way in the future, but I did a diorama with this pretty big window, and I actually played a time lapse of like all of the clouds moving and stuff on the monitor outside of it, and then
Nice.
I actually moved my lights around to make it look like there was, changing lighting inside the diorama. And that was actually one of the most fun ones that I did, but I haven't done something like that really since I started the channel. So,
Hey, so one last thing, and then we'll take off. Can you explain to the audience how we were talking about the compositing of shots, how you can program your Rhino dolly or slider to do one particular motion? So can you explain how that would work?
yeah, so it can get a little bit complicated, but the idea is let's just take the Rhino slider and the camera motion out of it. If you put a camera on a tripod, you can film your scene in a number of different ways. Let's say you film one with normal lighting, so you can kind of see all the details. You film one with light coming in through a window in the background, kind of doing backlighting. Then maybe you do one with a bunch of fog that comes in. You can take all of those individual clips and put them into a compositing software, and you can kind of mix each layer into your shot, and so you can dial in the amount of fog, let's say you want, maybe dial in the amount of backlighting you want, all in post-production. And so with a Rhino slider, you can do the same thing, but with camera motion now, because typically if you just had a normal slider and you did a slider move, you could not replicate that move exactly. And so all of those different shots that you would take, they wouldn't line up correctly. But
Right, all your layers would be moving at a different time, and it would look like a mess.
exactly, yeah. So with the Rhino, it's not the most advanced and accurate slider system. You can get a lot better professional systems out there for this, but it's good enough that you can do basic slider moves that'll be at the same exact speed. And so then you just kind of sync them all in your post-production software, and then you could do the same thing, and you can layer in some of these details, but you have a motorized, motion controlled, I guess, move.
Yeah, that's fascinating. If anyone out there wants to kind of go and see an example of what we're talking about, the first one that comes off the top of my head is there's some behind the scenes stuff on Blade Runner 2049, and you can see how they're doing a similar thing to what Nick is talking about. They're filming miniatures with motion control cameras, and then they repeat the camera move over and over again, sometimes very low light, sometimes very high light, sometimes with smoke and fog textures, and then they just combine it in a similar way to what you would combine layers in Photoshop. It's just done in a program that's layering the video layers together, and it's composited into one final shot. So with all that, Nick, is there anything you want to add before I take off here?
Yeah, I mean, on that note, just because I know it's really relevant, if you go and check out a channel on YouTube called Slice of Life, these guys made their own miniatures and did an entire short film.
I've seen it. It's so good.
Yeah, it looks like Blade Runner, but they do the same thing, and they have some videos where they walk through how they do it.
I will put a link to that also.
Yeah, otherwise, Tinu, I'm really excited to have been on here with you. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it was awesome. I love your stuff and how you're passionate about really meeting other creators too, and just kind of collaborating. I love that collaboration you guys just did.
Oh, thanks. It was a lot of fun, man. It was like it felt like boys club for a little while on Discord between us. So it was nice.
It's awesome. No, it's awesome. And I just appreciate you having me on for sure.
Oh man, it's my pleasure, and we'll do it again. And I'm excited to watch you continue to explode. And I would hope everyone goes check out Abandoned Miniatures. And it's let's see how if I'm gonna butcher this, Nick Levasseur.
You got it.
Did I?
You got it.
Okay, go and check him out. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, Nick.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.
Craft Pod 13.